So any questions, Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, no, sorry, did you want to?
We just had a couple more things we wanted to add to the presentation, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. I am going to introduce two of my colleagues to talk about next steps for next year, but I also just wanted to touch on a really important thing for me, and that is that the tripartite itself is really about collaboration, not just with council and the CCOs, but with our central government partners and businesses as well. The initiative itself is supported by our key NZ Inc partners, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. It supports central government's aspirations for Auckland as our largest economic centre, and also NZ Inc's broader geopolitical interests in both Asia and North America. It also supports the government's business growth agenda goal to lift the ratio of exports to gross domestic product to 40% by 2025, and is of course aligned with the Auckland Plan. In terms of the partnership with Guangzhou and how this elevates that, it is very supportive to the government's goal to grow New Zealand and China's two-way trade to $30 billion by 2020. And with LA, this is a chance for us to sharpen the economic trade and investment focus around some key sectors of mutual interest, like film, television, and applied technologies. But I would like to introduce Kuro Dickinson from the Global Partnerships and Strategy team, who is the Program Manager for the Tripartite, and Darren Grant, the Project Lead from ATEED for the summit next year, to just talk about next steps.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just be very brief and just note just the first point up on the slide there, which is the tripartite program. We're going to Auckland's participation in the tripartite is going to be managed through a program of activity that's going to be coordinated by the council's GPS team in association with relevant key CCOs, including ATEED. The work program is going to be sponsored by the council's chief of staff and is going to be governed by a steering group. The governance structure is going to sit horizontally across all the projects that might happen under the tripartite. For example, the Auckland-hosted 2016 Tripartite Summit will be led by ATEED. The purpose of this approach is to wrap a program structure around the council family's collective tripartite efforts. It's going to enable us to track, and it's going to enable us to measure the progress, report on activity to the governing body or to the Economic Development Committee, and report on the various projects in an effective manner, as well as document our progress along the way. And the Council's governing structure for the Tripartite's work program is attached to this report as Attachment D. And just on the last point before I hand it over to Darren, that we are committed to providing regular updates to the Economic Development Committee. So we are planning to report on the 2016 Tripartite Summit more specifically and in detail at the Economic Development Committee that's scheduled for the 18th of August. I'll just hand over to Darren Grant to just flag some of the key aspects of what is planned for next year's summit here in Auckland.
Thank you. In terms of the tripartite agreement, there is basically annual summits that are shared around the three locations. So it was LA this year, Auckland in 2016, and Guangzhou in 2017. Basically, the planning is already underway in terms of Auckland 2016. It's an excellent opportunity for us to be showcasing the city and showcasing our sectors and our businesses. Basically, we're taking a real strong business-to-business focus and making sure that we have real connectivity between the delegates from Auckland, Los Angeles and Guangzhou, with a real focus on progressing business opportunities and outcomes. Basically, we want to make sure that there's strong participation from the community, and basically that political participation, that we're working with Maori and Maori groups, and also that we're working with corporates to make sure that there's good corporate sponsorship and participation in the event. As part of the overall program, a big thing for us will be getting the engagement before May. So it's not just about focusing on the May event, but the lead up to that May event and making sure that we get really good engagement with the business community. Also continue to work with the delegates that went to Los Angeles. They're our best advocates and our best examples of what can happen, but they also have the insights in terms of what is really useful for business as part of that summit. So basically we had our first alumni session this week, and we'll be looking to continue to work with that group as we put the summit together.
Thank you. That's it.
Questions?
That's the
Get ready for
conclusion.
questions.
Okay, any questions then?
Yeah.
Questions? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Sounds really like fantastic opportunities. I guess I'm going to ask from a ratepayer advocacy position. If you were to say, because we get a lot of flack about our CCOs and how much we spend on CCOs, ATED, etc. People say stick to your knitting, rates, rubbish, rats, roads, etc. I'd be really interested to see what some of our delegates had to say around if they were saying what will be the direct benefit to Aucklanders for these connections, because I think it's not highly spelled out here, it's very business speak and all that, but I think we get a lot of criticism. But I really like to see how we can communicate that, and not just from council, but from delegates, about the benefits to Aucklanders who've, put the funding in here.
I'll comment briefly on that. So for us as a small business, it does two things. First of all, it gives confidence in the business and the investment in it, so that there's continued employment. For us as an example, we're generating a world-leading technology. So there's that leading aspect. Also from us in the water space, it's showing potentially a sustainable, renewable perspective of using technology. In terms of an output from the delegation, we think we've now got that link into the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. That gives us a landing point in the US, in California, in one of the biggest markets for our technology. So the export earning potentials are just huge. So, I think those two aspects are probably the best outcome as us as an example.
And so just, because what I want to... Oh, sorry, okay.
I was going to say, from our point of view, we're hiring 6 more people at the moment. Direct result so far, I think we've got about $300,000 worth of export revenue coming into New Zealand from the US from this trip. So and we've got another 50 engagements that we're currently progressing at the moment. So as I said, we're a weightless export company. So, which again, from a carbon offset point of view, is pretty good.
Yeah.
So again, the world is becoming about intangible assets. So fixed asset heavy companies, are really in trouble. And as a country, we've got to have these relationships so that we can get our ideas into these bigger capital markets. Because if we don't, then it's no longer about grass and tourism. And as we're seeing with the Fonterra share price drop at the moment. So we need to diversify, and by doing that through intangible assets is critical. This is literally the biggest topic going on at the moment. If you went and sat down with Elon Musk, this is what he wants to talk about.
Absolutely. I think when we're opening offices in other countries, people will say, "Oh, jobs for people over there." So it's So no, that just answers it. I just think we really need to have people saying the investment that we're putting in at a council level is really good leverage for these opportunities.
So the reason I mentioned about opening offices is when you're dealing in a foreign market, you've got to have, in particular in the US, you've got to have a US front person.
Absolutely.
Or you've got to base yourself in either LA or San Fran or one of the major towns. So if you don't have that presence, you won't get the work. The reason we got the $3 billion US defence contractor is because we had a US citizen, because we can't get that work as non-nationals.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Questions? So, Councillor Holtz, you got...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not really a question, it's kind of a feedback. Are you okay with a feedback?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And I've got two quick points. First of all, I just actually really want to acknowledge the very clear and focused presentation. And I do have a question. Why is this not on the front page of our council website? Why is that video not the first thing you see when you press Auckland Council? That's my first. I'll just leave that hanging, and hopefully to our comms people we might say, pull your finger out and maybe we need to talk about this. Because Councillor Cooper is on the button. We are at the bottom of the world, what feels like when you're flying 1,000,000 miles away from everything big that's happening out there in the universe, and we cannot think that Lord of the Rings is going to solve everything, because it's not. We have to take it to the markets, and I acknowledge our two businesses for saying, This is the really big grown-up world in which we are functioning. If we want to get those billion-dollar deals, and 1% of a billion-dollar deal is jobs, let's focus on that. Around this table, we have speech after speech after speech after speech about jobs and economic development and saving the rates. Well, this is jobs, this is economic development, and I feel myself getting a bit passionate, so I'll manage my level of enthusiasm here.
Okay.
But I just want to, let me go for a second, Mr. Chair, because I'm actually going to acknowledge our two councillors and say they stepped up and they stepped into a really challenging place, because when you put your hand up to go on an overseas trip, you take all the social media criticism, you take all the Herald criticism, you take all the backbiting and backchat,
From other
and you take
councillors.
all the backstabbing that goes with it. And the word junket was used in association with these two councillors. We need to say zero tolerance to A, that sort of bullying, B, zero tolerance to that sort of small-minded attitude, and zero tolerance to not stepping up to do your job as an Auckland councillor. These two stepped up. Councillor and I stepped up, the Mayor stepped up, you've stepped up, Councillor Walker stepped up. I think we need to look at how we interact with the international scene differently. So, Mr. Chair, I acknowledge Councillor Webster has, and I know that there are other councillors who will step up. But as an organisation, we need to get behind our councillors who are doing this work for us and support them every step of the way. And it's about time that we all participated. I don't often call it how it is, Mr. Chair, but good on those who've done the mahi, acknowledging
Okay,
them.
well,
So we just
we'll
put
take
our
that
hand
as your
up.
speaking turn.
That was
We
my
haven't-
speaking turn, I'm
Actually got the
done.
motion on the floor. Councillor Webster.
Yes, I just a very,
Oh, no, was it going to be a question or a
a
speech?
question.
Oh,
No, I'm
okay,
not putting a
okay,
speech.
question.
Well, it says feedback.
I agree with everything councillor Hull said, of course. But can I just ask Michael, is it?
Yeah.
No, the other one, John.
John.
Sorry. As a small start-up company, how long do you think it would have taken you to get the recognition that you've now got if you hadn't gone on one of these trips?
Maybe I could, if I make a comparison with my previous employment, I shan't name a name, but one of the largest electronics exporters from New Zealand, they would spend millions of dollars, and it would take 1 or 2 years to gain a meeting like that with a utility like LADWP. The relationship through Auckland Council to LA City enabled us to pull that together in a matter of weeks. That gives us a huge credibility, and some of the publicity that came from that, we've got an article in the local press about the delegation, our participation in that. That gives us credibility with our potential customers and our market opportunities. It gives our investor owner confidence in what we're achieving, and it does accelerate us to market. So it's hugely beneficial, and it's actually more or less impossible to put a price on that.
Thank you. Thank you.